Welcome to the Steady On podcast, where God's hard truth meets your hard story. I'm Angie Bauman, and this is episode 128, A Different View. And my guest today is author and speaker Vona Johnson. As you listen to Vona, don't let her soft voice fool you. This is a powerhouse woman with an important message. She calls her book a light read with a heavy message because her passion is to help us address those stirrings in our soul that make us feel that something is missing, and to address that longing with a deep, abiding connection with Jesus Christ. In our culture, we are taught to long for something that we can't quite define. We chase it, we strive for it, we work to make it ours. But the road to what it is we really need, a meaningful relationship with Jesus, isn't about hustling. It's about trusting. It's about resting. It's about believing that walking on the path He lays out before us is really, truly, actually what will bring us everything we long to have. Which is why a verse on rest is our theme for an episode on attaining. Matthew 11:30, right after Jesus invites us to wear His yoke, it tells us why to do that by reminding us, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That's in the NIV. Friend, in order to find what our soul longs for, we must decide to stop the madness. And you know me, I'm talking to myself more than anyone here. We must trust Him enough to sit with Him, read His word, study what we're reading, ask our questions, listen to His answers, and then repeat that process again and again and again. One more time today, you'll hear us calling you back to the one thing that will shine light on all the confusion and chaos in our lives: Jesus. Jesus. Time with Jesus. Nothing else substitutes. Let's listen in. Hello, Steady On community, and welcome into this podcast episode. I'm Angie Bauman, and with me today is Vona Johnson. Vona, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I am really excited to have this conversation with you and your community.
I am so excited to have you, and I want to talk to you about what it means to have more in our relationship with Jesus, more abundance, more life. And I'm just wondering, as we start off, what do you think are some reasons that people of faith experience a longing in their soul? A longing in their soul, I've heard you say that before, to me indicates that there's something missing, something that we want that we don't have, right? And where does that come from, do you think? And why do we feel unable to connect to this abundance that, for those of us who follow Him, we know He offers it, right? We do, but it's hard to connect to sometimes. Talk to me about why that is.
The best way for me to describe it is my own personal experience.
Absolutely.
I had an amazing career. Happy marriage, beautiful children. I mean, I had it all. And I truly felt like something was missing. There was just this longing, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know what it was. And then when I started getting into Bible studies and developing a relationship with Jesus, I started to realize that that's the thing that was missing in my life. And I think the reason that we sense that is because we get so busy. We all have these, dreams and desires that we're trying to fulfill, and we strive so hard. And so we're either too busy, we're distracted, and sometimes this is a bigger one, we're fearful. God has given us a mission, and we have doubts about whether we're capable of fulfilling that, or we have doubts as to whether He really wants us to do that. And so that fear will hold us back. And so I just feel like that there, it's kind of a combination of those different things at different times, but that's really, I think, what keeps us longing for more.
Remind me what you said. You said distracted and fearful. And there was one more that you said right there.
Busyness.
Just busyness. Okay.
Just being busy.
Yeah. So
sometimes we're doing all the right things.
It's the right things. Yeah. But yeah, for those of us who are in the church, a lot of times the busyness comes from church and God related work, if you will. And, right. And that's can be some of the most deceptive distraction there is. And I'm speaking from my personal experience there. Absolutely. Yeah. So, what was your season of life? What was your age when you got into the Bible study and you began to feel this or experience this sort of oh, this may be the thing I'm missing? Where were you in life around then?
I was just peaking in my career.
Mm-hmm.
My children were either graduated and moving on, or that my youngest was still at home. And I was finally, though, getting that point where I made time to get into women's Bible studies. And, I was, Beth Moore and Priscilla Scherer, and I mean, all those women who literally changed my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I get
You do
emotional
not
about it
need to be
because
sorry. No,
it is
I
so
know exactly.
powerful.
Yeah, it is so powerful when the fire for the word becomes alive. And I'll get emotional too. Mine was in a precept Bible study, studying the book of Joshua 20 plus years ago now. And when I began to really understand this hunger that I had for the word, it's insatiable and so satisfying at the same time. And which is just like, this unique combination of. And so had you been in church a while, or were you new to church also?
So as a young child, I was in church. And in my book, I talk about the fact that in my middle school years, my folks had been recently divorced. As kids didn't want to go to church. And it was really easy for my mom to just say, enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so we left. I mean, truly, I don't know. We probably did the big holidays or whatever with grandma and things, but it was years until I met my husband. I was really searching by then, which I was also a single mom by then. And during that process of developing that baby, when I was pregnant and alone, and I mean, talk about prayer and the need need for something, I just really turned to God. And truly, the moment, this is one of my stories, is that moment when I was reading the little blue line, and I call it the line that literally changed my life, because I was headed down the wrong path fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard God whisper to me, don't worry, we've got this.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I really started, searching for him. I literally met my husband 2 months after graduate. I was in college, had a baby, and it was just like all of the things I wanted just went bing, 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 bing. God just started giving me those things. And he gave me such a godly man. And so I started the church again at that time, but this was still several years later, as I was doing all the things. And I think that's part of it is we as Christians can be complacent. It's like, oh, I'm going to church on Sunday. I'm teaching Sunday school. I'm doing all the things. But I hadn't opened myself up to the relationship part of it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it last night, and the way that I can best describe it is, think about that person that maybe you run into them at the grocery store and hey, how you doing? And about 2 minutes into the conversation, you're kind of out of things to talk about because you really don't know them that well.
Yeah.
And then you think about that best friend that you haven't seen for years, or you've seen yesterday. It doesn't matter, because every time you pick up the conversation and you just fly.
And you never run out of things to talk about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that to me is that true longing when our souls want that relationship with Jesus, where you can just have that conversation anytime, anywhere. You don't have to. I was at that place where it was like, I prayed when, my friend was sick, or we needed, or whatever. And it wasn't until I got into those Bible studies and started realizing that he was there for me for everything. And then that to me is that's when we start to live our more, is when we have that relationship and we turn to him for everything, and things just come together.
You talked about one of the reasons that we don't have it is fear. And I absolutely agree with you 110% on that. And that even that we're fearful of our mission. And I like the way that you said that, or the fearful of our calling, if you will. Sometimes I say it that way because we feel it. And then we begin to take steps forward and we understand. This is what I think. I'd like to know your opinion on this. I think we understand how much we'll have to depend on God in order, because we can't do it in our own strength, because that's the essence of a calling.
Yes.
And when we realize we can't do it in our own strength, we shrink back, we pull back in that fear, I think. Did you experience that, or how would you put it in your words? Tell me how you see that fear of our mission or our calling.
And for me, there are different levels of that
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes our calling isn't our vocation.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a matter of being prepared to share our story when we're just having coffee with a girlfriend who's hurting.
Yeah.
And we give them all of the advice we can give that's earthly advice, but we don't just say, you know what, I need you to think about just having this conversation with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
So I mean, it can come from so many different directions, but for me, so like I talked about, I had this great career, and I mean, we had it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then God started saying, uh, I want you to, I want you to set all of that aside. I call it letting go of the good to get the better.
That gives me chills. Just the idea that I can just imagine the fear or that feeling in your gut when you're like, I think he's asking me to step away from something that's such a huge part of my life. Oh, yes.
Yes. And he did.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my husband's response was, because I took early retirement literally months within being eligible to take the early retirement. But when you do that, you leave half your salary on the table, right?
Wow.
And my husband was like, we have plans, we have dreams. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And I always laughingly say, God lured me away from that great career, but with the promise that I was going to make millions of dollars as a coach.
How's that
And he
working?
knew that wasn't the plan at all, but I wasn't going to do it if I didn't have
Right,
that
right, right.
promise.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found is that um, the more wasn't the money, the
Yeah.
more was learning to trust him,
Mm-hmm.
because all of the things that I've learned to do since that change in my, becoming my starting my own business and becoming a coach and writing a book and all the things that he was leading me to, none of that was about the money. It was about learning to trust him. And that's living our more.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to something you've said a couple of times because you referred to yourself and your family, your life as having it all. A couple of times I've heard you say, we had it all. We had it all. Does Vona Johnson think that she has it all now?
I have more than all.
I wonder.
And that's what's funny is we think it's the job, it's the things that we do that make us complete. And truly he's going to take care of us no matter where we are if we trust him and we let him. And a real turning point for me was when I was agonizing over this decision as to whether I was going to quit my job or retire or not. Was my cousin one day who looked at me, and poor thing, I don't know how many times we had gone through this, and she just looked at me and she said, "Are you going to starve to death?"
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
No.
And so many times since then, he has just shown me that he provides everything I need.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I don't know, I can't tell a difference in our lifestyle at all, other than I am not stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like the things I gave up truly were the things that were making me unhealthy. And, I mean, if we had problems in our life, it was because of that striving that I was doing all the time. And I just thank God every day that I had the courage to step out in faith. That's kind of my tagline is step out in faith and live in more. And
how long has that been for you now that you made that really big life change?
it's been 5 years, a little more than 5 years.
Okay. And I'm guessing there were initially, did you have some doubts in the first, let's say 6 months or so? Was that pretty rocky? When did it kind of, settle down for you a little bit?
About the last 6 months.
Yeah. I appreciate your honesty because I think that's such an important part of it, right? Like when we feel that, like God calling us to make a shift, because I've been there too, sister. When we feel that, and then we finally are like, okay, I'm letting this go. I'm signing the papers. I took the early retirement, whatever that is in our life, right? And then it's like pretty good for a couple of days. And then all of a sudden it's not so good because something, whatever. And then we question the calling. We question our wisdom. We question the Lord, I think. And so, yeah, I'm just curious if any of that was your experience.
For me, what happened was, and again, I talked about a little while ago about the trusting him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first of all, I left to become a health coach, and I went through, I mean, I've spent a lot of money getting the health coach certification, and then the life coach certification, and the master certification, and the business training. And I mean, all of those things. And then I kept getting invited to do things that related to my faith.
Mm.
And then I realized that that's where he wanted to. It was actually during a coaching session one day when she was coaching us through this mantra or whatever. And at the end, she was like, "What are you hiding?" And I just burst into tears. And
Oh,
faith was the thing that came to my mind.
yeah,
And I had done that my whole career. I had to wear my professional hat and
sure.
had the sense that, you don't wear your cross if you have an important meeting because somebody might be offended by that. And so I was living this split life, and I was still doing it even after, and so he was leading me to this ministry, as you called it. And part of me is like, that's in the faith that I belong to. And I know that you're a minister, and I love the work you're doing, but my church, women are not
Women didn't.
ministers.
Sure. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and I'm okay with, I feel that I'm exactly where God wants me to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had conversations with my pastors, and I'm reaching those people who maybe have stepped away from the church.
Mm-hmm.
They don't trust God anymore because things haven't worked out the way they thought they would.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and my journey has been that. And so it's like I've laughingly said, well, two different things. One is I've never been such a failure in my whole life, and knew that I was absolutely where I needed to be. And then the other thing is that there have been times when God would open a door of opportunity for me, and I would race through and leave him standing there holding the door. And so for me, the journey has been to learn that there's a lesson in everything. And the lessons that I have learned along my failures have been some of the most important lessons I will ever learn. And truly, it's all about, if he wanted me to be that $1 million health coach, I would be that right now. But that wasn't his plan for me. And accepting that was the biggest part.
Yeah. So, what is your definition of living your more? Then we've talked about it. I think I understand what it's like for you, but for somebody listening, that's like, what is the living my more? How would you encourage them to define that?
For me, the easiest way to do it, and you hit it right on the head at the beginning when we started about something missing, because more is actually an acronym for missing. Then we create habits. We start to create habits that create order in our lives. That's what the O is for. And then the R is redefining our priorities, or finding our purpose. And then the E is living our eternal purpose. And truly, it's living our more is living our faith, having a deep relationship with Jesus. And that's a process. That's not, you don't just say, okay, I'm going to do it today, and you flip a switch and you're all of a sudden there. But it's getting into the word. It's starting that gratitude and prayer, and just developing that relationship. I'm actually in the process of writing my second book that are going to just focus on the habits of living our more, because it's truly, forgiveness and all of the things that God asks us to do. Not all the things, because that's already, that book has already been written.
Yeah.
But a short version of it for somebody who may be intimidated by reading the Bible and
Yeah.
finding all
Right.
of that.
What are some spiritual practices, spiritual habits, I like to call them, that we can prioritize in order to stay connected and be intentional about our relationship with Jesus? I want to see if I got this more acronym right. And for those of you listening, I'm going to put this down in the show notes so that if in case you want to see it and you didn't grab it the first time. But the M is for like identifying what's missing, or identifying that there's a feeling of something missing, right? O is how do we begin to create, I would say, like order from chaos, if you will, if the missing is chaos, right? Like,
that's exactly the
yeah.
terminology I use. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So, so order. And then R is for redefining our purpose, like in your situation, the career, the demanding, but prestigious, may I say it that way, career, that brought a sense of identity. We have this system of, like, I think Brene Brown would call it the reckoning, right? Like at this redefining our purpose. And then the E is to live out our eternal purpose. Did I have that? Do I have that right from what you said?
You do. And one of the things that we kind of touched on before that I think is really important is I think sometimes people are intimidated when we talk about living our calling, stepping into redefining our purpose, because I talk to people who are not, there's that something missing. They're not happy in their career, whatever. And I think sometimes they shy away because they're too close to retirement, or there's too many things in their life that would be a really big step to just go get a different job. Yeah. And that's always our answer, right? Well, if you're not happy in your job, go get a different job. But sometimes it's just shifting our perspective, which is a different view, right? Shifting it to that biblical perspective and seeing that God has us where we are for a reason, and it might be to minister to that person across the aisle. And truly he did that to me one time. I was lured away from a really great job. I went to a local bank, and it was like a step back, thinking again I was going to get all of this. And really what happened was I developed a relationship with another woman there, and I know that I was there, not I learned things in that job, but I was there to help walk her through losing a spouse. I was there for a year. He was gone. And then I went back to my old job again. And I'm just so grateful that God used me that way, and that I took the step that I needed to be there. And she needed me there.
I love that. I love that perspective so much. And it reminds me of, and I'll tag this conversation, I'll put it in the show notes, but I had a conversation just recently with Michelle Myers and Summer Phoebus, who've written a book called She Works His Way. And what it does, Vona, is it talks very much about, like, wherever our work is, we have an opportunity to witness. We have an opportunity to be the light of Jesus. And so for the one listening that might be unhappy in your work, whether you're at home, whether you're, whatever that might be, I encourage you to listen to what Vona is saying, and maybe even look at that conversation again if you haven't listened to it already. Because it really challenged me, because it like, we have the opportunity where we are to be this more. We can receive the more, and we can be the more. And for some people, changing jobs, or if your job is at home with littles, that's not going to change tomorrow, and but it can be awful some days, and so how do we then, like you said, shift our perspective, redefine our purpose, not in that our behavior needs to change, but that the heart or the motivation behind the behavior has the opportunity to grow and be more because of him.
So there's that. And then there's always a lesson. And so every day, if we can just say, okay, that didn't go the way I thought it would, or I wanted it to, Lord, what do I need to take away from that experience to help me grow and be a better person?
Yeah. So give us a little peek into this second book, if you will, because I want to ask you, what are some practical ways if I have a relationship that feels stagnant, if I am aware that something is missing, but I don't really know how to address it? Would you give us just some practical things that have helped you and, help others to sort of open us up to this idea of more?
Yeah. For me, the biggest thing was to get a Bible that you can resonate with, that when you read it, you're like, oh, yes. Because it doesn't matter what challenge I am going through. And I have just developed that practice of being in my word every single day. And okay, I'll be honest, when I'm on vacation or I've got a really busy day, sometimes it's not until the end of the day. And sometimes I do 2 or 3 days at a time to catch up. But I always have a devotional, but the words are it's not just, I can't think of it truly is a living word, and it brings us what we need every time. So if there's only one change you can make, it is get in the word. And I have found that those times when I am just really struggling with something, it amazes me how just recently, even I was struggling with an issue, and I was just doing my devotion, and the next chapter not the devotion itself, but the next chapter dealt exactly with the issue that I was struggling with. And so it's just right there. So always, and make sure it's a good study Bible, because sometimes honestly, I can read the scripture and it'll leave me kind of, oh, okay. And then I'll read the footnotes and go, oh,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
What is your go-to? Can I ask what study Bible do you use?
I use the Life Application Study Bible, the New Living Translation.
I love the New Living. Yeah. Yeah.
I do too. I do too. I have the old, I actually did a podcast on this once. Somebody on Facebook one time referenced that dirty old book referring to the Bible. And I actually did a blog post and then later a podcast episode titled that, because I did a picture of my first New Living Translation that was duct taped together.
Yeah. But yeah, the ones that are falling apart and you just don't want to part with them, but you're like, what? Yeah.
Since then I have replaced it with a nice leather bound.
But I don't know about you. I write in mine. And so like when it starts, so I've got this one that I use that the imitation leather, if you will, is like peeling off the spine. And every time I use it, there's like little pieces of imitation leather, but I've written in it and I've preached from it for years. And I'm like, no, I can't, you can't leave me because I need you.
I actually don't write in it, but mine is highlighted everywhere.
Yeah,
and what I love to do is if I'm looking for a verse and then I see, I'm flipping through and I see a highlight, I always stop and read it.
Yes.
And, like, yeah.
And that is like a different form of journalism or journaling, because it reminds me anyway of like, oh yeah, I remember when he spoke to me about that. I remember that day when he showed up, as you said, like when I was in the middle of something and what that meant to me. And so those notes for me in my Bible, I can get just lost in reading my own notes related to different verses and things, because it just reminds me they are tangible reminders of his faithfulness in my life. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So since we're on the word, I got to ask, do you have maybe a favorite? It doesn't have to be the favorite, but do you have a favorite verse of scripture that is something that as you're living your more, you cling to, that's just a promise that is dear to you?
I do. And it's probably one that people bring often here, but
doesn't matter.
It's Matthew 11:28-30.
I love that.
Can I just read it?
I would love for you to. What version are you reading? Is this the NLT?
Yes.
Yeah. I love it.
Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light."
Yeah.
And folks, that's it.
Yeah.
Because we try so hard to do it all ourselves, to carry the burden. And I love to say it as though a big part of that this time for me has been trying to figure out what's mine and what's his.
Yes.
And I'm learning that it's just, I do what I can without stress and overwhelm and all of the things that I was carrying before, doing what I can, and then stopping and resting and trusting that if it's meant to be, it will be.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
That, I'm better off in this relationship and having a happy soul, a rested soul, than I am to work all the time. And that's not what he wants for us. That's not our promise.
I love that. And I love that verse is so important to you. I have grown so much in that area, just even the last couple of years, as I recognized that rest in my life really was a trust issue. It was a pride issue. If all of this doesn't get done, and if I'm not the one that does it, then what? Then the world falls apart. And I'm instructed to rest, and it became this, like, I think it was something that was missing. I'm going to use your more. It was something that was missing, and I needed to sort of bring order to the chaos, if you will. And that is, for me, it's become, how do I live my life so that I have created, I live it based on the idea that I will, Sundays after church, for me, Sundays after church until bedtime, not work, especially like not work at this computer, not work on ministry stuff, not work, that I will watch a movie with my husband. I will take a walk around the lake. I will read a book because I want to,
Yes.
but what do I do during the week to create space for that? Because it takes, at least for me anyway, it takes intentionality. And so I just encourage whoever's listening that for me, it's been a process. I have not arrived, but I have grown a lot, and really asked myself the question, what keeps you from doing it? And one was preparing to do it, but one was playing God in my own life and making an idol, if you will, out of the productivity, out of the work, instead of surrendering it and say, actually, I trust you that you will help me decide the most important things to do. And some things, they may not be the important thing that I think they are.
Amen.
Yeah.
I so agree with that. And another lesson that was a really hard one for me to learn was that I needed to find what worked for me.
Exactly.
And just because that works for you doesn't mean that that's my thing. And
or
so,
that it'll work for me forever,
right.
because based on the season of life that we're in, that would not have worked for me when I had littles,
Yes.
so yeah. So you have to know what works for you, but also what works for you now. And and allow God to, I think, shift that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're in conversation with him, he will tell us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It goes back to that.
Yeah. This has been fantastic. Before I let you go, Vona, I always end on asking guests this question because I love to share resources, and I will definitely put your study Bible in with resources. But what else is helping you with your more right now? What are you reading, listening to, studying? Anything goes that's keeping you connected in the Word, connected to Jesus, living your more.
A couple of things. I just finished a Bible study with my Bible study group that was called Praying Luther's Small Catechism.
Okay.
And so we go through the creeds and the Lord's the Lord's Supper, and I mean all of the things that we just do by rote.
Yes.
And dig deep into what the meaning behind those words are. And it's so beautiful. And honestly, we went through it, over a 9-week period or whatever as a group. And I'm going to go back this summer while we're on break and do it again, just alone, because there was just so much beauty in, from his perspective, even just the Lord's Prayer is just incredible. And then I'm also doing a group study on Lead Like Jesus. It's Ken Blanchard,
Okay.
Bill Hodges, and Phyllis Hendry. And oh my gosh, it is just, so full of really good information on leadership, not just in the work, but in our community and in our families, and really rich stuff.
Yeah. Vona, thank you so much for being with us today. I have learned a lot from you. I love your gentle, peaceful, non-anxious presence. That's what I have experienced with this time with you today. And you obviously are a woman that has learned a lot about what it means to let go and to trust him. And we are better because you are putting this work into the world. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation. I'm just really excited to be a part of the work that you do. And it is so, so important. And
thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And Vona can be found at vonajohnson.com. And her book is a Different View, Start Living the Life Your Soul Longs For. And I will, of course, put all of that information and where you can find and follow her in today's show notes. And again, thank you so much for being here. And friend, thank you for listening. Until next time, peace. It may not be a prestigious career God asks you to walk away from, but if your soul is hungry for more, God will ask you to walk away from what you're using as a substitute and yoke yourself to him instead. Thank you, Vona, for your kind and gentle encouragement to remember the only thing that's worth remembering. It all stems from our willingness to connect ourselves with him. Vona's book again is A Different View, Start Living the Life Your Soul Longs For, and she can be found at vonajohnson.com, and all of that information, of course, is in today's show notes. Matthew 11:30, again, this time from the Message. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Next week, Danielle Burnock will be my guest on the show. Danielle's ministry is called Victorious Souls, and she'll be with us to talk about what it means to move from surviving to thriving in some of the most difficult places of our lives. Danielle talks smart about overcoming trauma, and I know you'll be inspired by her story and her ability to thrive. If you haven't yet, I'd be so grateful if you would follow the podcast on whatever directory you're using to listen. It only takes a second, and it guarantees you'll see new episodes as soon as they drop. Thank you so much for listening. I pray wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.